Love Hurts is unfortunately a movie that hurts to watch, so let's talk about it. But as always, before we get started, if you're new here, my name is Erin, and I talk all things movies and TV, but really mostly movies, so if you're into that sort of thing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you've already seen this movie, go ahead and let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments below. But without further ado, let's talk about Love Hurts. So in this, we follow a realtor named Marv, who is played by Quan, and he is just trying to live a normal life. But when people from his past pop back up in his life, he must return to a life that he tried to leave behind. Jumping right into the good, and the first thing I have here is of course Quan. Now there were very few bright spots in this film, but he was one of those few bright spots. He was a lot of fun to watch, and I just need him in more lead roles after watching this movie. It's just really unfortunate that this film kinda sucks. His character was of course this realtor named Marv, who was just trying to create a normal life for himself and trying to forget and distance himself from the life he used to live. And even though they didn't go into that as much as I think they could have, Quan did the best he could with what they gave him, because in my opinion, they didn't give him much to work with to start. But anyways, he also, at least to my knowledge, did all of the fighting choreography himself, which was really cool, and I'll touch on that in a sec. But before we move on, I do want to mention Ariana DeBose, because she also did a great job. But again, it was one of those cases where the script just really didn't do her any favors. I also thought she had great chemistry with Quan. Those two together on screen were very charismatic and a lot of fun. And it seemed like this movie had something really cool going with both of their characters, but they really didn't dig into that, which is a common theme in this movie. So we didn't get to see these two very talented actors truly shine in this thing. So at the end of the day, this is one of those cases where the actors did good, but the script and the plot and everything else just kind of held them back. Next up for the good, I have the action. And I thought the action was easily the best part of this movie. It was very well choreographed, and they also used some pretty creative camera angles as well. And there was definitely no shortage of that action either. It was very close quarters, hand-to-hand combat where you're using random items around you as weapons, and it was really cool. It definitely reminds you of those old Jackie Chan movies. And the fact that Quan did all of his fight choreography himself just made all of these action scenes feel a little bit more real and a little bit more practical. Plus, Marshawn Lynch in all of these scenes was hilarious in my opinion. Marshawn Lynch is a character in himself, so all he had to do was just be himself in this movie, and it works in my opinion. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is the plot. And this, in my opinion, is where this movie just kind of starts to miss the mark. It just really couldn't figure out what it wanted to be. I mean, was this an action comedy, a love story, or a story about betrayal between two brothers? I don't know, and I think it felt like this because all of the ideas and themes that this movie brought up, it didn't really want to explore or explain those ideas, so everything just felt half-baked and incomplete in my opinion. And that just made it impossible to really be invested in anything that was happening in this film. Plus, when your movie is filled with mostly action, it's very tough to explore anything outside of that. And finally, getting into the bad, and the first thing I have here is just the overall character development. Despite the charisma of both Ariana DeBose and Quan, their characters were paper thin. And I kid you not, the way they kind of developed their characters in this movie was using voiceover to explain the thoughts that were going on in their heads. I mean, there is a moment in this film where Ariana DeBose's character leaves Quan's character Marv behind so she can go and confront and take on the main villain. And we obviously all know that eventually Marv is going to follow her and show up and help her take on the main villain, which he eventually does. But before we get to that moment where he leaves and follows her, we cut to a random shot of Ariana DeBose's character, and we get another one of those voiceover thoughts that literally says, "Marv, you better follow me." I kid you not, word for word, that is exactly what it says. I even took a note on it on my phone so I could mention it in this review. It was just things like that that kept happening throughout this movie where I was just like, you don't need to keep telling and explaining us what we're seeing seeing on screen. We can see it, we know exactly what's about to happen. It was really one of those cases, just do more showing and less telling. But anyways, look, I know it's not that type of movie, and I don't expect this action comedy to have super deep and layered characters, but I do wish this movie just took a little bit more time to develop those characters so they wouldn't have to constantly tell us what they're thinking and feeling throughout this entire film. And the last thing I have for the bad, and I think a lot of this movie's problems stem from this right here, and that is that I think this film is just a little bit too short. So this thing is under 90 minutes, which is really short compared to other movies we get today. So because of that short runtime, this thing was obviously very fast paced, and with the lack of character development and the lack of identity in the plot, it really felt like this film didn't give itself enough time to really explore and explain that and other aspects of the film. It was very much, all right, here's an action scene, and then here's another scene that's going to take us to our next action scene. And don't get me wrong, I love a fast-paced movie just as much as the next person, but I would have been okay if this runtime had a couple more minutes on it just to give this movie a little bit more time to really explain their ideas and the plot lines that they brought up a tiny bit more. And I'm not saying they have to go super deep into those plot lines because, again, I know this isn't that type of movie, but I think like 10 or 15 minutes added to that runtime would have helped this movie just breathe a little bit more and let us as an audience get invested a little bit more to what we're seeing on screen, because they would have had just a teeny bit more time to really kind of explore those themes and ideas that they brought up. So with that said, this was a pretty underwhelming movie at the end of the day. Outside of the action in Ke Huy Quan, there wasn't much to celebrate in this thing, so this is one you can definitely skip. Those are my thoughts on Love Hurts. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.